Salutations, everybody. Hello, world. Welcome to another episode of Perspectives Podcast. We are your hosts. My name is Littyyy Bro Flacko. This is Holden Stephan Roy. Say hi, Holden.
Hi, Holden.
Today we've got EO Dub veteran alumni, the Dubbchivist, hip hop aficionado, New York official all day representative. I don't know if let me just introduce you as the Dubbchivist. I was gonna call you Olivier. I was gonna do the thing where like I ask you to do the thing. I need to relax. Let the show
All
take hold.
good, man. Yo, peace and love, man. Peace and love. Happy to be here. Appreciate y'all having me. What's cracking, world?
Yo, appreciate you taking the time to be with us. For real. Thank you so much. Um,
Absolutely, man.
so the way we start off the show is we give our origin story, right? Because we're gonna ask you for your origin story. So it's only fair for us to share our origin story with you. You know what I'm saying? So me and Holden, right? I was going on the Littyyy Bros promo tour, right? Doing me and Jess was doing Littyyy Bros Volume 1. And I got Jess to fall back from doing the engineering on Littyyy Bros Volume 1, right? And I handed it over to a homie up in Montreal, the homie Merker Miyagi, and he took care of all the engineering duty. And so, like,
Right.
usually, Merker might as well be a New Yorker, right? Because the way that he operates is like he does not promote anybody that he works with because he doesn't want to be obligated to promote some trash. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, sometimes you work with people that you don't want to promote necessarily. So you promote one person, now you got to promote everybody. You know what I mean? So he don't promote nobody that he works with. You know what I'm saying? But he
Okay.
ended up promoting us, and it was like, according to Holden, like a very like alluring post that made him be like, wait a minute, I gotta check these guys out. So he checked us out and he liked what he heard enough that it led him down to reviewing the album, right? And
Nice.
Holden
Nice.
did reviews amongst other things back then, right? And me being the thirst bucket that I was like, yo, we should do an interview. He was like, I was gonna ask you to do that. And so we did the interview, and bro, that shit was like therapy. So I was like, yo, you know what? Be dope. We join forces, and I start bringing some of the homies, right, to you, and we start interviewing them together. And
Nice.
51 episodes later, here we
No,
are.
I think we
Woo.
miscounted and we're at 52 now. That's what we had discovered. So this is 52.
Really?
Yeah.
So
Wow. So
Mass
this
Law,
is so this is
so
so
Mass Law
officially
was the
this would
50th
be
episode.
Last was the
so I would
51st.
be
Based on,
I would
Oh
be
wait,
because remember,
the
anyway, we
full
double checked
right.
it
episode
and
count in
you
a
had
year.
pointed out that I had miscounted and we are officially at 52 this point.
Word. So, here we
I'm
are,
like
52
I'm
episodes later,
I'm like the 1 year anniversary then.
Yeah.
somewhat semi.
Yeah. That's fucking good shit. That's what's
Right.
good.
So Holden has his set of questions he likes to ask, right? But like I like to cut him off and ask something else first, which is why don't you tell the people what your name is, what you go by, where you're from, and then where your parents are from.
Mm.
Okay, all right. So my government name is Olivier Daniel Utino. Um,
What?
yeah,
That
most
is
people know
French as
me as
fuck.
most people know me as O. Within the Dub circles, the extended Zoom family would know me as the Dubbchivist. I've also gone under the pen names of Haiti and 1804. That's 180H, the number 4. Um, and so what could I say, man? I mean, I'm a New York City kid, born and raised, as you alluded to earlier, Flacco. Um, Born in the Bronx, never lived a second there in my entire life. Came home right to Queens. Yep, BX stand up. Interesting story before we get in any deeper. Like my wife and I were actually born in the same hospital, roughly 3, almost 4 years apart. So yeah, shout to Albert Einstein Medical Center up in the BX.
Shouts to Albert
And
Einstein,
then and then been a Queens kid my whole life. 42 years living in Queens. So I'm like 54 toes down, you know what I'm saying, as a New Yorker. And what else, man? Let's see.
Your parents?
Yeah.
My parents are both Haitian immigrants. So both of my parents were born in the
And that is where the
Caribbean
name
nation.
comes from.
Yeah,
That is where the name comes from.
I was wondering.
puzzling. I was like, that seems very French to me.
Yo,
Olivier.
that is
I know that.
That was a super French name when he said it. I was like, I was gonna ask, but I was like, you know what? Just let the goddamn journey go where it's gonna go. It's gonna take you where you want to go. You gotta trust in the journey sometimes.
We gonna get there, B. We gonna get there. As long as we moving, we gonna get there.
I knew I asked you about where your parents was from, and I was gonna get the answer in there somewhere.
Yeah, for sure, man. So yeah, both of my parents born and raised in the country of Haiti. Father immigrated to this country in 1963, November, which is kind of interesting timing. And then historically, and then my mother actually immigrated to the States in 1968, which again is a historically relevant time in this country. So yeah, man, that's where I'm from.
I'm gonna let Holden jump into his first question, but like, okay. I want you to make sure to, after you're done answering that, let's touch back on the relevance of those years in particular that you mentioned.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, because like, I'm not from your country a little bit, so like, I mean, I know a bit of U.S. history, and I follow one too. Mm-hmm. But a whole lot of the world don't know the context of which probably is relevant and interesting context that the world maybe should know about.
I was thinking he was referencing Haiti's history, right? So like,
is it Haiti's history?
Yeah. No, it's actually United States history that's extremely relevant to those time periods.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
I digress.
Into that.
So yeah.
So yeah, we can
we're gonna get into it.
Go with the question then. It's a bit of a story. It starts out with my girlfriend. She'd be washing the dishes one time. She got her phone out and she's playing that Black Eyed Peas song. I got a feeling. Ooh. She vibing. She dancing. She doing her thing. And I just kind of like look at her and I have this thought to myself and I'm like, when the fuck did this song become chorus music, right? Because you think about this song, run it back like 10 years, and it's like middle of the night, party vibes, everybody drunk, dancing around, celebrations, victory, fun times. Run it 10 years into the future, Song doesn't change at all because it's a song, but we evolve so much as people that the context this song has in our life has changed, and now it's some shit we play when we be washing dishes or working out or doing other boring things and want to go back to those days of drunkenly celebrating whatever we were celebrating. And that got me just thinking about the cycles of music and stuff and how all these little ones running around partying to this music, they don't even know that one day is their future dishes washing and chores music, or that like when I heard the Pop Smoke, it was like that's the new dishes washing music and stuff, because it just jumps right there for me. Like we skipped the steps and shit. And then it brought me, and then it made me think about all these journeys and the placement of life and stuff, and how like usually in these interviews and stuff, but especially with people at hip hop and whatnot, everybody's story starts when they're like, I don't know, 10, 11 years old, when they first discover hip-hop, or they just decide to start rapping, or some other catalyst takes place. But usually it's because that's when we start to form our identities, so it's when we start caring about music, etc. But if we think about music and its influence on us, is something that when you popped out that medical center place in the Bronx, right, there was a good chance there was a song playing in that room, and a little baby Dubbchivist was absorbing the energies of that song, even if none of us remember it. And I just started like thinking a bit about it's like my childhood and stuff, being like 5 years old up in the apartment in Montreal, where like we had those gray boxes all over the living room, the tape deck and the preamp and the amp and the radio one, and the wires going around with the surround sound speakers all around the crib. And you know, my dad would bust out the Led Zeppelin tapes and things like that in the daytime. At nighttime, it was a lot more of these like club mixes that would be live from the clubs in Montreal. And then my mom's, it was more like Disney's and musicals and love songs and discos and all of that kind of stuff. And it was just like this realization of all these different sounds and songs and things that kind of impacted me before I had any control over what I listened to, and how much that like hit me to this very day. It made me realize the story just starts way earlier than we usually do. So I was hoping, Mr. Olivier the Dubbchivist, that you could run us back to the youngest Olivier you could remember being, and tell us a little bit about what it sounds like to be you, but also with that context that, you know, most of us ain't from the Queens and don't know a lot about it, and are maybe not even from your country.
Man, so music, like most people, has always been like there, right? It's always been present, like you say, from nascence, right? Probably the youngest and earliest like musical memories I have. When I was a kid, there wasn't necessarily a song or you know, a genre that kind of sticks out. What does stick out, I mean, obviously there was music and there was influential music, and I'll touch on a couple of those things in a second, right? But what music did for me, or at least what music represented for me, was a cool. You know what I'm saying? Like, just kind of like clout, I guess would be the word that we use today, right? So like, you know, I could just remember like as a kid, I used to have this red windbreaker jacket, right? Typical kind of like, you know, late 70s, early 80s, is red, little zip up or snap button windbreaker. And I can remember like as a kid, I would always put on this windbreaker, find some sunglasses. My father used to have some Ray-Ban aviators back in the day at this time. And I would either put on the sunglasses or not, but always with the red windbreaker. And I would grab an old tennis racket, and I would turn that tennis racket around and pretend as though I was strumming on a guitar, right? On the tennis racket strings. And so like, I just remember and can recall always feeling like musicians were cool. Musicians had their fingers on the pulse of like the hip, the now, the what's going down. And so like, they, you know, I guess naturally I kind of just had this kind of like affinity for music, because I found that musicians and musicianship was kind of cool, right? And people who did those things were cool. And so I wanted to be cool. And so I would emulate that, you know what I mean? By putting on my little red windbreaker and acting like a fucking rock star, right? So like those young memories, there is no kind of like specific song or genre or anything of that nature. However, my parents, you know, as I mentioned at the top, you know, did come to this country at, you know, at pivotal times. If you think of 63, you think of 68. In November of 1963, John F. Kennedy is assassinated. In the summer of 1968, Martin Luther King is assassinated, to be followed up shortly thereafter by Robert Kennedy. So the country in general at the time that my parents were arriving was definitely within the throes of like the civil rights movement, right? People's movements for equality, equality across the board in pay and race relations and housing, and all of these things are popping off. And so protest and struggle music was really kind of like prevalent, you know what I'm saying? Like rock in a big way. My parents were huge or my mom in particular was a huge Beatles fan. But like protest and struggle music, so like Jimi Hendrix, Willie Nelson, um, you know, shit. Nelson Mandela's in jail at the as I'm a kid. So Stevie Wonder, you know, banging on WBAI or WKCR. You know, every year of Nelson Mandela's birthday, you know what I'm saying? We'd be listening to kind of like these protest songs and stations, and Stevie Wonder's, free Nelson Mandela was always, like something that would play often, you know what I mean? Or that I would hear often. So things of that nature, man, like, understanding like Woodstock, even though like my parents weren't here in at the time, or even if they were, they didn't attend, but the feeling of like, people's populist movements, you know what I'm saying, equality movements, etc. So that kind of music and that kind of idea for people's rights and people's struggle has always been in close association with the music. And if you fast forward a little bit, like you alluded to, like people being 9 or 10 years old, and that's kind of like where there's some of their first memories in music come from. The music that was like striking a chord with me, at kind of those ages was very much in line with what I had been exposed to by my parents, right? And in that I'm talking about like Public Enemy, you know what I'm saying? Talking about Fight the Power and shit like that. I'm talking about disruptors like NWA, right? Like listening to Straight Outta Compton for the first time, or hearing that for the first time, and just really being blown away by profanity in music and people being unapologetically black in their music. You know what I'm saying? And kind of like raising this awareness of fights and of struggles that are going on, right? That are age old and day old and forever old. You know what I'm saying? And so like, especially when it comes to like being that young and listening to like an NWA and being like, oh man, like, kind of like, feeling kind of like, almost giddy in a way, you know what I mean? Like I got this shit in my headphones and, and I'm talking like the little, thin aluminum, with the fuzzy, with the little like orange and black, the little foam covered headphones, right? Like the shit that if you took off the foam, the headphone like would be tweaking in your ear and popping, and you could hear all that, all that crackling and shit in your ears. So this is like back and like being giddy and shit, like, oh shit, like I'm listening to this shit. These dudes are cursing up a storm, but they saying shit that kind of like resonates with me and the things that I've been taught to kind of look out for and be wary of, and be sensitive to, and those kind of things. So it was always like, and even a recognition, oddly so, ironically so, that what was being said and what I was hearing in my ears, although it was kind of like protest and struggle music, was also kind of like out of bounds for me at that age, you know what I'm saying? And like, should someone discover that I was listening to that, they'd be held to pay. So, and then I am at the end of the day, and first and foremost, a kid from Queens. And so, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, feeling and knowing that at the time in the early 80s, there was a lot of noise coming out of Queens from the likes of, MC Shan, the Cold Crush Crew, Marley Marl, Run from Run DMC was a next door neighbor to my cousins back in the day. He and his family, like in the Raising Hell days, you know what I'm saying? So, You know, recognizing in that LL Cool J making tremendous noise, you know, Rush Management, Cold Chillin' Records, like all of that shit. Like there was a recognition that I was kind of in a place where a lot of magic was happening, if you will, in terms of like hip hop. You know what I'm saying?
I do, but can I just say, these are some of the most like thorough answers. Like you be like pulling shit out of books in your head, just like fucking cross referencing here. It's wild to listen to you like think out loud. That's so cool.
Thank